Buenos días. Como decía Marisa, es como un encuentro anual que nos pone al día y es un placer para mí que después del año pasado cerré un poco el congreso, este año un poco empiezo el congreso y mi tarea, como decía Marisa, es presentar a Brian O'Connor. Brian O'Connor, please come here. Yo conocí a Brian O'Connor hace años, creo que 2007 y 2008. Yo estaba entonces como director, presidente o CEO de Fundación TIC Salut en Barcelona, en Cataluña. Aquella época no había smartphones todavía, o sea, el smartphone salió luego. Tampoco había la idea de la nube, ni la idea de smartphones, ni la idea de artificial intelligence. Pero encontré a Brian en un congreso en Barcelona, hablamos y me comentó que él quería hacer algo en este ámbito y empezó entonces a crear la European Connected ECHAlliance. Brian O'Connor es una persona que es digamos, de trayectoria muy larga en temas profesionales, de business. Ha sido, o sea, es from North Island. Sabe lo que es North Island, ¿no? Y lo que supone aquel tiempo, lo que pasaba allí. Y desde entonces él estuvo en Hong Kong durante 12 años como manager de un instituto de salud en Hong Kong. En la época que Hong Kong era inglesa todavía, o sea, que no era China, pero en colonia inglesa. Y después está trabajando mucho en temas sociales, en temas de ancianos, en temas de asistencia personal, pero sobre todo es una persona entrañable. Para situarnos, Brian O'Connor es el cuarto de 13 hermanos, o sea, cuarto de 13 hermanos en Belfast. Y con lo cual es una persona que tiene una gran capacidad de empatía y que su misión, entre otras actualmente, es justamente lo siguiente. Me comentó en el 2007-2008 diciendo: yo no entiendo el tema salud, porque todo el mundo está en silos, o sea, hay diferentes sectores, las farmacias, los hospitales, primaria, las empresas, la universidad, pero cada uno tiene su libro. Y yo quiero hacer algo que permita que este libro sea compartido. Y es cuando Brian empezó a crear la European Connected Alliance, que hablará él directamente, pero que es una forma importante, ligando con mi discurso que hice el año pasado, que me acuerdo, es de que hoy día no podemos avanzar juntos si no compartimos, si no trabajamos en equipo, si no somos capaces de admitir que no sabemos y que hacemos más conjuntamente. Con lo cual es un honor para nosotros, yo creo que este Brian O'Connor aquí, un poco para explicarnos cómo funciona la Alliance. Por cierto, pues estamos bien con el gobierno vasco de salud, que estamos creando un ecosistema en Euskadi. Esta tarde tenemos una reunión concreta con todos unos partners, ¿no? Pero sea como sea, yo creo que Brian os va a explicar muy bien lo que está haciendo como persona profesional, como persona con experiencia, para que en Europa y parte del mundo tengamos una mejor capacidad de coordinarnos y ayudarnos. Y no puedo acabar, antes de dar a Brian, felicitar a Marisa, porque sin ti, ¿qué haríamos, Marisa? O sea, sin ti no haríamos nada. O sea, gracias por invitarnos, gracias por organizar el Congreso y gracias por estar siempre liderando este proceso de crear este ambiente de compartir conocimiento. Os dejo pues con Brian O'Connor. Brian.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm sure whatever Joanne said was really good. I have no idea what he said. But thank you, Joanne. First of all, my sincere thanks to Marisa and the organising team here for inviting me. I have one complaint. Right? The complaint is, why are we all inside when we should be outside looking at the view? Because I go to lots of conferences and none of them that I've come to have a view like that or a setting like this. So you shouldn't listen too much to me. If anyone prefers to walk on the beach, that's perfectly fine for me. I looked at the Congress timetable and I thought, would I want to sit where you're sitting, listening to someone for 45 minutes? My conclusion was no. I mean, who wants to listen to anyone for 45 minutes? So I'm going to try to make my presentation or speech more about my experiences, more about the lessons I've learned. Do not expect any words of wisdom from me. You'll get lots of words of experience, but not necessarily wisdom. I think Joanne mentioned that I come from a large family, 6 brothers, 6 sisters. That was my real experience. Surviving a family of that size is not easy. Nevertheless, it was a family in Belfast, Northern Ireland. It was a family in what was designated by the European Commission as the most deprived area of Western Europe. What did we do when we were told that? We went and had a party. Why did we have a party? Because once the European Commission decides you're really, really, really poor, then they give you lots of money. So we were quite happy with that. I didn't understand why we were having a party, but my father said, this is good news. And as a result, all of where I lived with the rest of the family, the house was demolished, new houses were built, the whole place was transformed, some good, some bad points of it, but nevertheless it was transformed. What I found from that experience was that you really have to learn to survive. You need to collaborate. I couldn't do what I wanted because my other brothers and sisters were not necessarily in agreement with me. So everything I've done in my life, I've tried to learn lessons. Sometimes I have no choice, but I've learned lessons as I go along. What I find really exciting at the moment is the advances in healthcare, not just the technologies, that's very important, but most technologies, in my opinion, are tools. You have to start with the fundamental. What's the point of us all being here? What's the point of us talking about health and care, as we all do? I think we have to go back a little bit and say, what is our role? What is the role of government, of universities, of industry, all of us? And in my view, it is to look after, provide better health and care for all our citizens. I'm often struck at conferences the way people talk about patients, for example. And I just remind you, all of you, that you either have been a patient, you will be a patient, and I'm really quite selfish. I want all this innovation to accelerate, because when I get a little older, I'm already old, but older, I want to make sure that everything I want is ready. So I think we need to understand that we're part of a community, of a village, a town, a city, a country, and part of the world. And therefore we need to remember that the human touch is still important. Human beings still matter. We're not being taken over by machines, whatever anyone tells you. We're just not. Machines are helping us. People fear robots, for example. I remember being in Brussels a few weeks back and someone said, oh, we're going to lose X millions of jobs to robots. And someone else said, yeah, but we're also going to create X, Y, Z million more jobs because of robots. Joanne, I think, from what I could understand, mentioned that I lived in Hong Kong and China for 12 years. That was definitely an experience because the cultures are so different. I guess the specific lesson I learned there was that, first of all, when I went to China first, I was told that communism, etc., etc. So I'm not going to get into a debate on religion, thinking or anything else. But what fascinated me was, when I first went to Shanghai, I was running a large company then in Hong Kong, which was nothing to do with healthcare. It had 47 subsidiaries in China. And the first thing I learned was the Chinese do not do things the way we do them. We in the West are so used to having a company does, what do you do as a company? If you then said, well, our company owns 5 printed circuit board factories in China, each employing 5,500 people. By the way, it's got 6 cement factories. By the way, it also owns a fish farm. It owns 4 golf courses. And so it mines coal and transports coal. And that's just in China. For them, that is normal. And I said, why do we buy these things? Very good answer from the Chinese people. They were for sale. They were for sale. What are you going to do with them? I'm going to sell them for more than I paid for them. So their mentality is more trading than building. We tend to think of building companies, building structures here. I'm not saying we're wrong and they're right or vice versa. I'm saying the culture is buy it, for €1, sell it for €5, and that's a good deal. We tend to build big bureaucracy sometimes in companies and governments because that's the way we work. Generally, they have in China what they call the emperor syndrome. I'm sure some of you who've been to China, when you get the tea at dinner, have any of you ever noticed the way they say thank you to the waiter who pours additional tea? They use their finger and they bend it like that and they go, and that is thank you, shei shei or whatever. Where that came from was, in the days of the emperors, anyone who raised their head above the level of the emperor had it chopped off. Because that was about the emperor syndrome and the peasants. You might be a better peasant than the next peasant, but you're still a peasant. Many Chinese companies are still run on the basis of a leader, and then somewhere down here, all the people who do the work. Their middle management, our approach, is just usually doesn't exist. They don't seem to do too badly from a commercial point of view, as you know. The other lesson I learned was, and I think I've applied this to the work I do in Europe, is they have the only Chinese word I ever learned, really, because it's a really difficult language, was weijie, or weijie, depending on which dialect you're talking in. Weijie is one word, two meanings. First meaning is crisis. Second meaning, opportunity. They say they invented this 5,500 years ago. And we've always heard about the Chinese saying, we have an old Chinese proverb. Just remember something. Very often they make it up 5 minutes earlier, a bit like the Irish do. It's not really necessarily a long time proverb. But weijie is really important when you think. Every time we look at situations, sometimes we see crisis or problems. Every one of those creates an opportunity and a need. We have, in many parts of Europe, a real crisis in healthcare. You look at the soaring costs where governments, you look at Britain, well, let me call it as it's called today, United Kingdom. How long that will last, who knows? But let's call it United Kingdom. In England alone, the budget of the NHS was £120 billion a year. £120 billion a year. They've now added another 30 billion or something to it. Did it solve the problems? No. Will it solve the problems? Unlikely. I don't mean nothing good is happening. What I mean is that money is not always the answer. You need a different mindset. I think the worst thing ever happened to the NHS was a number of years ago when the Labour government were there and they decided they would change the name of the NHS to our NHS. This was Tony Blair, who felt that it was a populist thing to do, to say this is your NHS. The population believed him. And as a result, they regard anything that is not going well in the NHS as an affront, a difficulty for them. So what they actually do is they insist more and more money is put in. Look at the structure of the NHS. And you find that while there are good parts, much money is wasted. Much money is still held back, not by technology. And this is something you may not have experienced in the Basque Country. The biggest problem, crisis if you like, in my opinion, is not innovation. It's actually not innovation. I think the real problem are people. If you look at the layers of management in most health systems, you will find there are people who want an easy life. They want to do their job, tick the box and go home. There's other people who try to take a bit of a risk. And they're very often the ones, unless they're particularly special, who don't survive. So it's about the mentality of us, the people. If you don't change that culture, you don't really make much use of innovation and new technologies. You just don't. So moving on then, rather than words of wisdom, I would tell you some of my experiences, which I think in themselves, I hope, will point a way forward for some of the things we're trying to do. When I came back to the UK after my time in Hong Kong and China, I had finished my time in Hong Kong by setting up the largest private healthcare company there. Because having dealt with the other business before, I then loved Hong Kong. Why did I love it? Because they made decisions. They made such fast decisions, it took a while to get used to it. Example, you could have lunch with someone, and over lunch, you could buy their company. I mean over lunch. What do we do here? We say, I'd like to buy your company. We need to talk about value. What do? We go off and we start doing due diligence. And with all due respect to accountants and lawyers in the room, the people who benefit from that are accountants and lawyers. That's the reality. In China, they don't do that. Hong Kong, they say, how much is your company worth? 100 million. Ah, rubbish. It's worth 50. So you argue. So tell me what your company revenue is. What's its assets, etc. And you say, okay, on the basis that you will deliver those figures you've just given me, I'll do a deal. Now, you shake hands on that deal then at lunch. And I've done this. Then you start doing some due diligence, because then you know the parameters of the deal. So when the results come back, they're very rarely exactly the same figures as you were given. And that's when you negotiate. So instead of saying, I've got 100 million of revenue, say, no, you've got 92 million of revenue. And you adjust the price. And then you conclude the deal. I've done deals which have been worth 75, 100 million US dollars in the space of 10 days. What do we do in the West? We worry about it. We go through all of this. And the Chinese, again, I'm not suggesting we should do this in the West, because I don't think the mentality is there. But a Hong Kong style deal is the way I prefer to do business, because you're ticking all the boxes. You're just doing them faster and a different starting point. So it's something to think about in terms of our own mentality towards not just deals, but about how do we deliver superb, high quality health and care to citizens, remembering we are citizens. The next thing I would say to you is this, that I've also learned a great lesson that when I came back and set up this ECHAlliance or ECHAlliance, I did it because I was frustrated by the lack of progress in the health industry sector generally. And that was because many people I found were in silos. So you had research institutes doing fantastic work. You had industry, startups, SMEs, and global. You had governments, procurement departments, health departments. You had very few patient groups involved in many of the decisions. So I decided, in my way, to set up the European Connected Health Alliance. It was just me, by the way, to begin with. And nevertheless, because I was ambitious, I decided I was going to build a membership organization which would embrace all of the silos. If you make progress, you want first all the silos in the same room. That itself is progress. So the way we approach things, and I don't know if the slides are, maybe not. Thanks, John. I just want to, this is what we've done in about 7 years. The reason we wanted to do this was to force a change in the way we approach innovation, the way we approach all of the issues in health and care. There was a crisis, but I saw an opportunity. Not so much for me, because this is a not-for-profit organization that I run. I do my other businesses elsewhere. I have to have other businesses because my wife has grown used to a certain style, a certain income, so I have to make sure I make money somewhere to keep her happy. But this is a not-for-profit organization, and it's dedicated to encouraging collaboration. And you can see that we have created, we haven't broken all the silos, we're not suggesting that, but we have at least encouraged the silos to start working together. And I'll give you a couple of quick instances in just a moment. Maybe we could move to the next one, Joanne. So that's what we do. If you just leave that for a moment, just to read that. This has not been easy. This has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, because you have to go around one by one and persuade people that it makes sense to come to meetings, to collaborate, to do real things. Now, at the beginning it was more difficult because we had no successes to point to, no track record. Now we've got a lot of track record, a lot of instances of success. And I think it's becoming easier to persuade people that it is only by collaboration that any real progress is made. I don't think there's anyone in the room who thinks they can do everything on their own. If there is, I'm not sure why you're sitting there and not standing here, because I don't think I can do everything on my own, which is why I've formed this collaborative network. What we try to do, and we've managed to succeed, is to actually take region by region, country by country, and understand it better. Because I don't come here for the first time to the Basque Country and think I understand all that you're doing. I don't. That would be arrogant. It'd also be stupid. What I am understanding, though, is you've made significant progress in your personal health records. You've made significant progress in your e-prescription. You may think, that's good, but there's lots of problems. Let me tell you, there are parts of Europe which would envy what you have done. The fact you have made this progress to you may seem, well, okay, it's okay, but we need to do more. And of course, you always need to do more. But don't underestimate the different parts of Europe who are not as far advanced as you. Please don't underestimate that. We have lots of experience of this. Obviously, there are others who maybe are more advanced than you in certain areas. And that's where we come in, to try to connect you to those other areas which you can learn from, which you can teach. And above all, you can only do that by collaboration. Right, Joanne? Let's go back. This is our existing, what we call ecosystems. As we said earlier, this is about bringing all the silos in the same room on a regular basis, permanent basis. Because it's only through permanently having these sorts of meetings that you get to know people. People, by the way, who you should know anyway. But my experience recently in Finland was I met a lady who I know well from Tampere in Finland, a professor. And we were standing at a conference and I said, oh, you must know this other lady. And she said, why? I said, well, she works in the same university as you. And I always get the same response. But there's thousands of us in the university. I brought the two ladies together and I said, you're at Tampere University, yes. Which building do you work in? Which campus do you work in? Same campus, same building. They realized then one worked on the 5th floor, one on the 4th floor. They were doing the same sort of work. They'd never met. They actually read each other's published papers and were really delighted to meet each other because they liked each other's work, but they'd never actually met. Now that's in one building. This is repeated everywhere we go. It really is a human thing that we need to connect more. When you connect more, you build a relationship. Over a period of time, you start building trust, and then you start doing things together. So this is where we are at present. This is where we've been opening these ecosystems. Most of them meet 4 times a year in their own geographic area. We're now developing it further by making sure there are exchange visits from one ecosystem to another. You'll have heard of Galicia, I'm sure. So Galicia are, in our experience, very innovative, get up and go. They recently asked us if we could help them meet people in Serbia and Slovenia. And I thought, can we? And the answer is we could. That was so successful, that visit, they're now going to the Netherlands at the end of this month. So that's the sort of, because they're not going just to the Netherlands, they're going to meet the people that we already know and our members in that area. So we can connect real people with real people who have similar interests, and then they start collaborating. This is what we're planning over the next 12 months or so. It's very ambitious, but when we started, it was very ambitious. If you don't set yourself those high goals, you won't really do very much. So this is the basis of what we try to do. The main point of ecosystems is to understand the need. What is the crisis? What are the needs? What are the gaps in what you're doing? You've done a lot in the Basque Country. There's other things you want to do. Often, not always, but often, the gaps that you have, the needs that you must fulfill, have solutions. They may or may not be in the Basque Country alone. So my recommendation to everyone is you need to be prepared to be much more international. This is not to take away from what you're doing here. Still do that. But understand, as I said earlier, there are other parts of Europe and elsewhere who actually are ahead of you in many of these things. There's others who are far behind you. And it's that combination of best practice experiences, real life experiences, that actually brings us all up to a higher level. So our job as the connector is to literally do that. So identify the needs first, is what we have learned. When you've done that, you then look for the solutions. They're not always in your home. Sometimes they are. So you'll see here an illustration, that's all it can be, of the sort of people who are our members. These range from large companies. I see EY's here, one of our members, and I see Tunstler here and others like that. But we also deliberately go out, recruit NHS or similar health systems across the country. It's interesting, we particularly seem to be focusing on procurement organisations, because we all know the problems with procurement. We also know that many people who do procurement want to be better. But for them, they need to understand what's available in the market. So we actually have workshops with procurement departments of governments to explain to them what is available in the market, because it's a very fast-moving market. Unfortunately, many of them don't have the opportunity of knowing what's available. So when they write the tender, they all too often have to write the tender on the basis of what they search on the internet. We would rather they met human beings and understand what's happening somewhere else. So we do this a lot. We actually exchange, either on phone calls or personal visits, and that is really working. It's really having an impact on many different situations. We recently, in Galicia, had some of our members come together to meet with the minister and other people in Galicia. That's the sort of connection we like to make, because that experience is now leading to that country with these partners talking to other countries about who have got similar needs and problems. Right, Joanne? We also try very hard, once you've identified the need and you start looking for solutions, the next thing you look is, where's the money coming from? Where is it? You've got your own funds, of course, in government, but that can be assisted by the many other funding sources around. Obviously, Horizon 2020, which you're familiar with, but there are many other sources of funding from different parts of the European Commission. We work with Sante, we work with Connect, we work with research, we work with all of these people. And many of them have funds which are hardly ever used. There's money sitting in Brussels which nobody applies for because they don't know it exists. So part of our job through our funding mechanisms is to tell our members, here are funding opportunities for you to take if you wish to have them. You still have to go through the proper process. But if you're not aware of a particular opportunity of funding, you're never going to apply for it. So, I mean, it's just common sense. So we do this, and we also have a project team based in Barcelona, but across Europe, who actually lead or do work packages for these various funding opportunities. I think we currently have 9 or 10 current EU projects underway, and we're applying for more. So again, we would be encouraging you, who may be interested in that sort of funding, to talk to us, to join us, and to see if we can assist. No guarantees, but we would certainly try to see if we can get some funding together. Yes, John? So that's what the Alliance does. So when you've established your priorities or crises or needs, we can help you find those solutions locally and internationally. Compare and contrast what you're doing and others are doing in different parts, particularly of Europe. The other thing I would say to you is this, so I don't want to keep you for 45 minutes, but I'll try to finish quickly, is this. The thing I've learned very much is that it's easy to get carried away, either seeing it as an opportunity or a problem with new technology. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I laugh sometimes when I see people promoting themselves, and apologies to anyone that's doing this in the room. When you attach a certain label to your activity, it has an effect on your value. So years ago, some of you are far too young to remember, but there was a thing called the dot-com boom. When the internet first appeared, all you had to do as a company was to say, we are xyz.com. And immediately everybody went, oh, wow, that's fantastic. You know how they valued those companies in those days? Looking back, you'd find this amazing. How much money they were losing, not making. Because the strange philosophy was, the more you lose, the more it means you're investing, and someday there'll be a big benefit come back. In 95% of those losing companies, they did what all losing companies do. They go bust eventually. It was only 5% or so that actually survived long enough to turn their service, their product, their idea into something valuable. You only have to look at things like Google. Look at Apple. In the early days, they went through real difficulty. You look at Amazon. Look at the guy that started Amazon. When he started, he decided he was going to sell books. Of course, they still sell books, but they sell everything else. I remember a friend of mine who knew him well. The guy that started Amazon used to wash cars at the weekend to get income. Think about this. He used to go along the street and say, I'll wash your car for so many dollars. They say, great. That's how he started. He then made a little bit of money and started Amazon. Nobody had ever heard of Amazon, right? They thought it was the depleting rainforests in South America, unfortunately. He went along and gave a lot of his friends $100 each and said, I'm starting a new company. I want you to go through online and buy some books. And they went, okay. So they did that to help him out because it wasn't their money, it was his money. When he went back the following month, he said, here's another $100. He said, no. We really like the service. We actually enjoy the books we're buying. We'll buy our own books. And that made him realize he was now in a disruptive business of disrupting the old-fashioned booksellers and so on. I know Joanne, for example, when he goes to London, loves to go into Waterstones, for example. Piccadilly, is it, or somewhere around there? Because he likes old books. Sorry, it's a bit unfair. He likes books generally, but he likes old books particularly. And that's still available. But where are most books bought these days? Not in bookshops. They're bought online. Where are most of them bought? Amazon. So he has now built a whole machine which originally lost money. Now it's making unbelievable sums of money because what it gives us is access to, this one-click thing. They estimate that Amazon's profits come from 3 sources. 1, data storage, because he invested enough in data storage at the beginning, and everybody else bought the storage from him, so he makes X amount from that every year. He then dreamt up this idea of one click, and we all talk about cybersecurity. How many of us have an Amazon account and put our credit card details in? So when we come to buy something, it says one click, and you click it. Because all that matters, you don't have to go and remember your credit card or anything else. We just do it because it's convenient, it's easy, and it solves all the problems. When my wife says to me, I just saw that, thought that Amazon pay for it. That's the usual thing in our house. I really like this. Good. Buy it for me. So I buy it. What do? One click. That's another area where he's made lots of money. The third area is one for anyone who uses Amazon. When you buy a particular book, I'm interested in historical fiction. I hate reading history books because to me, most of them are dull and boring. I don't remember the dates of various battles and things like that. I don't care about them. I just care about how it affected history. But when you do historical fiction, particularly Roman history, I read a lot. When I read that, within 2 days, 3 days, I get an email saying, people who bought this book also bought these books. So what do? Like the well-trained Amazon person that I am, I click on the other books because it's easy. And I know they're going to be books that I would like to read. So there's real lessons when you study Amazon. He's making it easy for us to buy. He's supplying us with goods that we wouldn't otherwise have to search around for. And he makes it easy from a credit card point of view and from a decision point of view. That philosophy has to transfer itself, not necessarily Amazon, though they're doing it, into the whole healthcare sector. Because the thing that I'm sure you realize as well is that the one factor that has not really applied itself up to now in the health and care sector generally is the biggest force in the world, in my opinion, the biggest force in the world, bar none, and that's the consumer. I don't know about you, but it's probably 15 to 20 years since I was in a bank. Why would I go to a bank? Why are banks closing branches, certainly in the UK? Because we don't need them. I hate if someone pays me for something and they give me a check, because it means I've got to go to the bank. So it's done online. You look at other industries, airline industry, hotel industry, etc. The consumer demands, we, the consumer, remember, this is not a separate class, this is us. We expect service, instant usually, service from everything. And where do we do it? Online. When you step on the bus, you buy a ticket from Bilbao Airport to San Sebastian. You go to your machine, you don't talk to anyone, you just go to your machine and you press the button and you put your credit card in or contactless in. Because that's what we expect as the consumer. The biggest opportunity, I think, in healthcare, and there are many of them, is applying consumer demand principles to what we all do. People don't want to wait any longer. They want to get information quickly, and they want, above all, to get service quickly, high quality service as well. So why is it then that Amazon, Apple, Google, all of these big names are already in the healthcare industry? I read articles from healthcare professionals who say, oh, that won't work. I don't know if you saw the recent survey when people who use Facebook were asked, would you trust, remember all the scandals, right? Would you trust Facebook with your personal health record? 45% said yes. Worldwide audience. That is something which is coming at us like a tsunami. If we, in all of our areas of expertise, do not adjust to that, we may well be like some of the .com companies. Governments have to adjust to that because, again, consumers demand that. There are many, many, many opportunities in that. Don't fear it at all. Embrace it. Come up with solutions which answer it. Not only will you make money, but you will actually deliver better services. Look at telehealth, telecare. Look at the question of data analysis. Look at the predictive ability when we've got such a huge amount of data around. Look at the ability to influence in a positive way people's lives. An example in Ireland. Recently, the ECHAlliance decided that it would, as part of its mission to inform people, we held a webinar, which was about, it was called maternal care and baby. And the first people who spoke at it were from Ireland. And they introduced themselves as saying, we want to tell you about our digital baby. Now, don't panic. This is not a robot born somewhere. This is digital baby. What did they mean by that? They meant that in January of last year, the first digital baby was born in Ireland, County Cork. Very healthy, mother, etc., etc. That baby had a digital health record from the moment the mother knew she was pregnant. The mother had a digital record as well. So that's the breed of people coming through. Why are they doing that? They've now extended that to 19 hospitals in Ireland. When they come on to the webinar with the Netherlands, South Denmark, Finland, Estonia, I think Catalonia, and a number of other people there. And the lessons really were that, why are they gathering that data? Well, they want people to have a digital record. But the overall data, the anonymized data, has helped them understand the difficulties that can arise, how to deal with them, how to intervene earlier than perhaps we do at the moment. So if you know there's a problem, you can do something. If you don't know there's a problem, you won't do anything. So that's an example of where something done in Ireland has been transferred across Europe through our organisation. And that continues, that work. There are many other examples. In Scotland, a friend of ours runs a programme for trying to change the way schools feed their pupils. They talk about obesity. The incidence of obesity in schools is frightening. We hear all sorts of initiatives. What they did was they decided that the people who might have some of the answers, or at least we should listen to the consumer, in this case the children, they may have answers themselves. And we did that. We actually ran a programme in the schools in Scotland. And as a result, they produced their solutions. Why were they eating all this junk food in between the school lunches? School lunches were terrible. Nobody would ever eat them, was the response we got. So you've got to change the school lunches. That was consumer demand. We then encouraged them. They started to understand the benefits of activities and so on and so forth. You educate them. Most people are smart. Most people are sensible. And they will understand that if they do this, it's bad. They do this, it's better. And though we all fall behind with our diets, as I do frequently, the reality is that when you understand something, you have more chance of actually succeeding in changing behaviour. That programme is now being run out across the whole of the United Kingdom because it works. So, finally to say, when I originally accepted the invitation to speak, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say, but as you know, as you gather by now, it doesn't stop me speaking. I hope it's been interesting, at least in part, to each of you. My last words would be this. You've done, in my opinion, and I go back to the days years ago when Rafa Bengoa, for example, was the Minister of Health here, all of those sorts of things, and I've watched the progress. You're in a very good position. I'm sure each of you have your own saying, well, yes, but let me tell you, don't underestimate what you've achieved already. Secondly, obviously, don't stop the progress. Connect with other countries and parts of Spain, parts of all over, because there are lessons to be learned, and it's fun as well, listening and meeting other people. And we should actually remember, life is partly meant to be about fun. Everyone has their own definition of it, obviously. I'm not saying you go to excess from in drinking or eating or whatever, but we need to have fun as well. And I get fun out of things, doing things I really enjoy. I really enjoy doing this. I hope you do as well. Thank you for listening.
Tenemos tiempo. Marisa nos dice que tenemos un poco de tiempo todavía. Si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta a Brian o un comentario, puede ser en español, no hay problema, traducimos. En vasco no puedo, pero sí. Lo siento. Nadie se anima, una pregunta. Sí, por favor.
I do actually. Certain parts of the states have this realised that with all of the questions over what's called Obamacare from a certain source, who happens to live in a house called the White House, but I don't want to mention his name. When you look at that, that is going to rely in the future on communication, first and foremost, and the ability of the citizens to understand what they're entitled to and what they can do. The only way to solve the Obamacare problem is to take it on through technology. The only way is to make the delivery costs of it, reduce those dramatically. So certain states, Massachusetts, for example, is very far advanced. They have they were the first to introduce what became known as Obamacare. They actually wrote the rules which then were transferred to the national government. They're a progressive Senate. We work very closely with the Senate of Massachusetts, have done for a long time. Their next step is things that may not sound groundbreaking but actually begin to work, is apps. We all know about apps, but what do we all do? We download lots of apps. How many times do you use them? I think the stats are 2%. We do it for the first day or two and then we go, But in their case, they have downloaded so that the way to do an app successfully is to make some benefit at the end of it by using it. Benefit by that means if you can access services more quickly on the app than you can on the internet, then you use it. Because we all want convenience. So I would say Massachusetts. The other place is definitely using this approach is Estonia. I mean, we spend a lot of time in Estonia. Estonia have got this public service platform. So almost every service in Estonia is supplied by a platform. Interesting enough, they always tell you the one thing you cannot do on their platform yet is get divorced. You can do everything else, but not divorce. But they're working on that. They have got all of their population, small population, 1.4 million people. Everybody uses the platform for everything. And one of the biggest uses of it, access to primary care doctors. So they literally speak to them through the platform. And again, you hear people saying, we can't have video consultation. Certain countries won't allow it, right? Reality? It's a reality. It actually happens in many places. So Estonia, Massachusetts, and possibly places like Finland. The Nordics seem to, for some reason, to be able to be ahead of most of us in Europe on the use of technology, but from a consumer perspective. In Finland, they've got a thing called My Data. Even the term is interesting, My Data, right? And that is directed directly at citizens. It's not run by the government. It's run by, effectively, organisations that represent citizens. And that's had a huge impact on the take-up of prevention, wellness programs, etc. And that's those are the sort of examples I'd love to be able to bring to the Basque Country and find out what you're doing and bring that elsewhere, because I think that's the way to progress.
Thank you, Brian. Creo, otra cuestión, no más cuestiones. Si me permite, Brian. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you very much for a lovely lecture. The question that I have is that a lot of healthcare professionals ourselves are very afraid of transformation, and I encounter that every day in clinical practice. So my question is, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's really trying to help the technology become more widespread in facing yourself against the resistance from female colleagues to try new technology? Because at the end of the day, all technology works, is cheap, is efficient, of course, with no advantages. What would be your thoughts?
I think, first of all, it's a situation which is worldwide. That's the first thing. Secondly, the way we have tackled it is to identify institutions or courses which are tackling it. So let me give you quick examples. In England, the NHS have set up a thing called the NHS Digital Academy. They run courses to try to present degree courses to existing medical professionals. So that allows them to become digitally, if that's the right word, qualified. And that gives a great deal of confidence to the person, because if you go back and have a master's degree in digital skills, let's call them, this applies to care as well as health. So we're doing that, but we've connected that academy to 5 or 6 other places around Europe, and indeed we've even connected them to places like, hard to believe this, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka have, Colombo University, have produced a master's degree course over the last 6 years and have graduated 250 doctors in digital skills. Now, it's only because I know those things through our network that I can actually even answer you. So the key is we have to offer, personally, I would like to see digital skills being included in the normal medical training. But in a way, we're trying to catch up with those people who didn't have it during their medical training, but we're trying to introduce it to the existing medical courses. It's a hard thing to do, but I think there are enough, if I can put it like this, younger doctors and professionals who want to be, have these skills, and over a period I think we'll succeed. If you don't have those, you're not really going to be able to give a really good service in the future using all the digital technologies. So it's a duty on you to be educated in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian, for this time and this speech. And only one thing I want to remind you is, despite the fact we talk about the alliance ecosystems, that is the main thing we're doing, every individual can be member of the alliance. It's for free. That means you go to the website, you know how to go inside, and you can have every month a newsletter with the news, what's going on, not only in Euskadi, in other parts of the world. I encourage you to do that. It's for free, and at the same time, encourage you to tell us you are happy being members. What is your ideas, suggestions to improve as a consumers too, as citizens, to improve our website and to improve the community. And you will find amazing, because you, as individual, can connect other people around Europe, in America, Canada, in Little China, Shanghai, But that means I insist on that because don't forget, it's not only for big organizations, not only the ecosystems, it's for you as people working in healthcare. Okay? Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you.